Hello and welcome. There are no horse racing selections on this video. This is purely the ramble from the 7th of November 2024. If you want horse racing selections for Friday the 8th of November, you need to go look on the previous video. I've done two separate videos. I was a little bit concerned about the prices of the selections for the 8th. Needn't have worried, they haven't massively moved before that, but in between doing these videos. But yeah, I felt like this might even be an extra long ramble. So yeah, done it as a separate video. So very clear, no horse racing selections. What I can tell you is on this video is I'm going to go through a few more channel stats that I haven't talked about since I've been back. So a little bit of channel stat update and musings on kind of my view of results to date. I'm then going to go and do the Tipster League from last Saturday and give you the result of that and the overall league table. There's some exciting news within that. And then the main chunk of what I want to talk about on the ramble, as alluded to, if you've watched the horse racing selection video for the 8th, I'm trying to wrap up in a way of how to talk about quite a few different subjects, some of which I've talked about before, but I'm going to try and be even clearer. Some of which I haven't talked about before, because what I try and do on this channel is just keep it light and breezy. Here's my selections and not tend to get into... So, I've said this before, I see this channel as intermediate. There are lots and lots of channels out there where you're beginner. Here's a horse, back it, it wins, doesn't win, that's it. What I do is accumulators, and there's a little bit of maths involved in what I'm talking about. What I try and do is stay away from the advanced stuff because it is niche. And to be honest, if I was inclined to want to set up some sort of paid channel, and in terms of talking about kind of more complicated stuff and educating people, then probably that's kind of the stuff where you could end up doing more stuff. And there's a few channels out there that talk about it, but some of the stuff I think I'm going to talk about tonight, I don't want to kind of build it up too much, but I genuinely don't recall seeing anybody explaining it in the way that I'm going to intend to try and explain it. So there will be absolute seasoned punters who watch this channel or are popping in, who will know what I'm talking about and understand what I'm talking about. There will be, I think, a significant chunk of people that might have their eyes opened by what I'm going to go through tonight in terms of explaining how the difference between a sports book and a betting exchange, and talking about the differences about the time of day you place a bet relative to your percentage chances of success, and to talk about how, generally speaking, as I've talked a lot on this channel, but I'm going to explain it hopefully even more clearly today, drifters aren't a bad thing, specifically speaking. So there's lots of things that people put out in the ether that in the horse racing world, like people mention about exchanges. Unless you've ever been on there, you don't really. A lot of people don't understand what it is. So I'm going to try and explain the difference of it without being super complicated. There's absolutely terminology I'm deliberately not going to go into on this video. So for those of you who are, know what's what, I'm not going to talk about arbitrage. I'm not going to talk about EV, expected value. I'm going to try and do a lot of stuff without getting into very complicated stuff, because the purpose of this is to open people's eyes more than it is to do some sort of betting world tutorial. So yeah, that is my intention of the channel is to keep it light, and so this point's going to be a bit heavier than usual without it, but I guess it's stuff that plays on my mind because I know I say things and I know that it's contrary to what a lot of other folk in the industry might say. I'm not in the industry. I'm a YouTube. I run a YouTube channel, horse racing, so maybe I am in the industry, but I'm not connected to the industry in a lot of ways. And what you see on, say, like ITV Racing is quite vanilla. They try and mix it up with a bit of Neapolitan every now and again, but generally speaking, it's quite vanilla stuff on there. And what they absolutely won't talk about, and what you won't see on a lot of racing channels, because they are affiliated, is to talk about bookmakers and basically how bookmakers make their money in the bookmaking market, and won't talk to you about why an exchange is very advantageous for lots of reasons for lots of folk. It won't work for every single person. So I'll try and do it, do it justice. We'll see what we get to. Right, strap yourselves in. That's 5 minutes of intro. So who knows how long the vid's going to be. Channel stats. Right, what I don't want to talk about channel stats. So since I've been back, so this is prior to any horses running on the 8th of November. So up until the 7th of November, I have made 38 videos since my extended break. 38 videos. Of those 38 videos, and this is a quiz, you can play along at home, right? So, you know, I'll tell you the question, I'll give you 2 second chance to think about it, and then I'll tell you the answer. Of 38 videos, how many, since I've been back, have made profit on the channel? So how many of 38 videos have made profit? Write your answers, send them in, PO box doesn't exist, whatever. The answer is 6. 6 winning days, that's 6 profitable days out of 38. That's all I've had, right? And I will talk all the time. I will have more losing days than winning days. That's how most people would have. But 6 out of 38 sounds terrible. Sounds terrible. 6 winning days. How many of the 38 days have I lost all my money? And I'm not including here, if there was one non-runner and there's like a £1 refund, that isn't losing all the money, that is a £1 refund back, right? So technically, numbers even bigger. How many of the 38 videos have we had a 0 return? So not a refund, not a return on anything. How many out of 38? The answer is 17. Nearly half of the videos, of the 38 videos since I've been back, have had a 0 return, complete strikeout, whether that's 4, 5, 6 horses, nothing getting us a return. Possibly there's some in there that might have you might have a place at a short price, but we didn't do each way or whatever it might be. But there are 17 out of 38 videos that made no return. And if you add up the figures, 32 in total lost. And of those 32 that lost, 17 were a 0 return. Winning days. Anybody know which day of the week since I've been back has been the best winning day? The answer is Saturday. 3 winning Saturdays, 2 winning Wednesdays and a winning Sunday. So you can work out the maths. I've lost any Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays or Fridays I've played. In actual fact, Thursdays and Fridays on 4 complete strikeouts on a Thursday, 4 complete strikeouts on a Friday. And I think it's 7 losing Fridays, 6 losing Thursdays, 4 losing Mondays, 2 losing Tuesdays. There's some lovely figures for you, right? Let me just check what else I was going to say on here. Okay, so got a couple of notes. So if you 38 days and 6 winning days, if you break that in half, the first 19 videos and the second 19 videos, in the first 19 videos, how many profitable days? How many of the 6 were in the first 19? The answer is 5. How many win days in the last 19 videos? 1. Technically speaking, it's 1 profitable day, which was last Saturday, Breeders' Cup, in the last 20 videos. That is the overall stats. But we are sat on £34.65 profit in that time, and that is without best price guaranteed, standout bookmaker prices and standout bookmaker places. And if you actually just take that as a headline figure, right, to be in profit, betting the night before without bog, without standout price and without standout places, 34.65 is actually all right, okay, and is considerably better than the vast majority of people punting would be able to achieve. But am I happy with where we are at? Absolutely, I am not happy with where we are at. It's frustrating me no end, the amount of strikeout days, because statistically, for me, we are in an abnormal place. That I am striking out way more than I should be. The handicap horses, that's where the problem lies. Not graded, not novice maiden bumpers, but handicap horses are massively underperforming, to the point I genuinely could, as most people suggest I might, well not most, some, I could close my eyes and throw some darts at a piece of a newspaper and I should statistically have done better than I have in the handicap races. That is slightly troubling me. Now, I could break it down and I could say to you, well, actually, when I first came back, it was at the first week, it was good. and then it's gone, because that's true. So it might be a seasonal changeover point of view, whereby the flats, the way I do the flat stuff, the form's tailed off and the all weather's not got going. That could be a logical answer. Somebody new messaged me the other day on the channel, was talking about how speed figures, they track their own speed figures for some of the all weather tracks, and they're basically seeing abnormalities this year compared to previous years about how the tracks are running. Anecdotally, I would say, and this is not statistically backed up, but just an observation I've been making on the all weather particularly, there seems to be a higher proportion of 3-year-old horses winning in those handicap races, in open handicap races. My general experience, is what memory says to me, and this could be completely flawed, but this is what my memory says, is at this time of year, it is more, you usually find a higher proportion of 4-year-old plus horses. And a lot of the horses I will pick tend to be in that category, because I'm looking at longer form. A lot of people just look at the last race, last 2 races, 3 races. I'll look over years of form to try and form an opinion. So those are all things that could be at play. It could be, as some people have suggested, just incredibly bad variance. And without going into too much of logic in there or whatever, basically I have good runs and bad runs and whatever, and overall it levels itself out. The answer is, it could be a bit of everything in there, and I'm not quite sure, and it's not sitting comfortably with me. So I, going forward, will be being very, very careful on the handicap stuff. The stats for the last, since I come back, so what's that, 7-8 weeks, suggest that Saturdays is where we are performing better. We've only struck out one Saturday. We've struck out twice on every other day of the week. Only struck out once on Saturday, and I've played every Saturday. So I'm going to be going forward leaning on the Saturdays. That doesn't mean I'm putting more stake on, but I'm more likely to be focusing my energy on the Saturday stuff, because it's better quality and it is less likely to be manipulated, and horses are more likely to be trying their best. What isn't sitting comfortably also, and I don't want to kind of go down a conspiracy theory route, is since sort of I have had my break, there are less people, in kind of profile people, YouTube, elsewhere, who are putting out accumulator bets, and I am one of very, very few, and the channel is at the size where the profile is reasonable, where a lot of people will follow in on an accumulator. What I'm also doing differently to bit before is I'm trying to minimise the selections down, whereas if you've been here a long time, you'll know I might put 3-4 Yankees out. Part of that strategy is because it is less exposing, so personally, outside the channel, it's less exposing to me, so I can spread money about, spread different bets about, and, it's not like, throwing darts, hoping something's going to hit, or, whatever. It's actually about being less obvious in terms of what you're doing. Putting a video out on a daily basis where I'm putting out 1 4-horse bet, 1 5-horse bet is much, much more exposing. And what you're seeing, if you pay attention to the bookmakers like Paddy or Betfair, that will list you the most popular accumulators of the day, regularly the bets I'm putting on the channel are hitting there. And that is, I would say, making me uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable because it is more exposing about what I am doing. And, some people would say you're never going to hit a bet like this with the profile like this, because actually the bookmakers wouldn't allow you. Now, I don't know what the true truth in there is. What I can tell you, and what everybody knows, is there is a level of corruption involved in the industry that I'm operating in. I am betting horses, and they don't always run to their true effect, or their true ability, and for a variety of different reasons. And most times that's to do with ultimately somebody somewhere is trying to profit from something. So, if I'm somebody who's putting out a bet that's then getting traction, and thousands of times that bet's being repeated, because as soon as it gets traction on a website like a Paddy or a Betfair, not just people following the channel, but other people think, oh, that's a popular bet, someone must know something, I'm going to try that bet too. And it basically snowballs. The liabilities for the bookmakers get so big that it would be an absolute concern. Someone said the other day, I think it was the day before yesterday's video, would we bankrupt Betfred? Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you put a bet out like sometimes I do, where there's 250 to 1 shots of 25 to 33, if they all won and there was thousands of people who had followed that bet, even for pence, that would absolutely do some damage to some bookmakers, depending on the size, because you would be talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds. So on a bet like that, even for like Channel 25p, even if you've got a bookmaker maxing you at £1 million payout, if that's 1,000 people getting £1 million, that's 1,000 million pounds. See what I'm saying? It's not good maths, but you know what I mean. So all of this is just sort of like musings in my head, right? But what I am not comfortable with at the moment is the level of exposure the channel's bets have, and whether or not there is something possibly going on that is impacting that, because statistically it is quite ridiculous the amount of just nothing going on. And where we have hit stuff, it's been Breeders' Cup or it's been high profile Saturday meetings. And so yes, that's my thoughts on it. I'm not wanting to go down any more musings than that on it, but as a standout figure, there is a small profit been made since I've come back, despite all that. But that is because literally we've had two decent days in 38, and there was but 4 other days where there has been some sort of minor profit. So it was that first Saturday I came back, we hit 2 Yankees and they were really both decent, and we've had the Breeders' Cup bet. They have been the 2 decent things in 38 days. Now, that isn't abnormal in terms of my betting. What is abnormal is the amount of just no return bet days, because that is absolutely abnormal. So, do with that what you will. What I am saying to you is that I am going to focus on a Saturday, and therefore I think there may be more days until I'm happier or seeing some sort of movement that I will be minimising my lower profile and weekday meeting stuff. But we will see. Dundalk might be a little exception, but that's Fridays. Okay, Tipster League. We've had that ramble. Now we're going to have Tipster League. Tipster League. Well, last week, 60 entries, 11 made profit. So it's not a top 10. I've done an 11. Patrick Langford, your 20p profit deserves to be put up in Sharpies. So here's last week's league table. Des Gibbons and Drawman, channel regulars, both hit £100 return on the Tipster League. Paul Mack 61, then joint 4th Steve Mitchell, ACCFC 2100, and then all the way down. So 11 profitable entries out of 60. So what does that do to the overall league table for the whole year? This is what it does. Des Gibbons has knocked off Shosman. Des Gibbons is the new number 1 Tipster League and competitor. 17 different weeks he's played, and he has £315.90. Shosman's on 310. Mike Fletcher 271. Then we've got a jump down money-wise to Gomez 164.60 and Adam S at 132.90. Well done, Des. I think you finally might get Shosman out of the cave, and he might be playing this Saturday, where I believe 11 races, and not even Breeders' Cup in sight. But speaking of Breeders' Cup, interestingly, and thank you for Stephen Statman King for all of the extra stuff about Tips League stuff, because I wouldn't know some of these little gems. 22 entries in 22 different entries involved one of the Breeders' Cup horses. So it doesn't necessarily mean it could be like somebody did 2 horses or whatever, but in total of all the entries, there were 22 selections of the Breeders' Cup. 1 horse of those 22 placed and none won. So last week, for those of you who were betting on the Breeders' Cup for the Tipster League, it did not serve you well. And also a message in dispatches does need to be had for George Duncan, who did not write his comment as a reply to the thread. It was just in the comments. He didn't make a subsequent entry. He would have come out with a £60 profit. Let that be a lesson to you all. Commiserations to George. You would have been 4th overall last week had that been a reply to the Tipster League comment. So that is the Tipster League. In terms of since I've been back in the Tipster League, no real change there. Ali Akbar and is ahead by like £1.50 over Steve, one of the Steves. Stephen Taylor, Stephen Mitchell, one of the Steves. So that's that. Right. So then we get to the big item. Right, let's get to the big item. So we're going to talk about betting market, price movements, adjustments, all sorts of stuff. So I've written a couple of notes on Sharpies that I'm going to hold up. And what I'm going to specifically focus on, and not, for no reason other than it was a good example, and I don't think it particularly different, differing example. But the 5 o'clock at Kempton on the 6th of November, Wednesday the 6th of November, we had a horse for the channel, Red Maids. It was about mid-division. But Wednesday the 6th of November, the 5 o'clock at Kempton, this is the race that I'm going to use as an illustrative point. And yeah, I did a little bit of work on it, and it came out, and I was like, do you know what, that's probably quite a helpful one to use as an example. 14 runner handicap at Kempton. So there's a lot of numbers on here. There's a lot of numbers. I'm going to try and explain it to you. So what you've got there is you've got all the horses listed down in final starting price betting order. That's all the horses. And what I've written is what the average price, because it's different bookmakers are different, but the average price at midnight the night before, what was the average price at midnight the night before? What was the average price, or the opening show as you might say, around the 4:30 mark? So half an hour before the race, generally what you would say is people's phraseology you see on stuff, when the betting market opened, the betting market opened at like 5:30 the night before for most bookmakers. There's a midnight cut. I didn't bother doing the night before, but this, because this is enough. This is half an hour before the race. This is the starting price. So what do you see when you look at that? What you see, and if you note what I've done here, is anything in green, 1, 2, 3, those are horses that shortened up between 4:30, so half an hour before the race, and midnight. 3 horses got shorter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 horses got bigger. 3 shorter, 9 bigger. I wouldn't say that is particularly abnormal, but I mean, I haven't done this for every race for ages, so but I wouldn't say it's abnormal. The difference between the prices for starting price versus half an hour before the race, 1 horse got shorter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 got bigger. That isn't necessarily that abnormal, but it is also a helpful kind of illustrator of a point here. So what you had at this race, Smart Hero, 7-2, second favourite at midnight before the race. By the time we got to half an hour before the race, it had gone into 2-1 favourite. It went off 6-4 favourite. So it came in total by 3 points. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in a betting market, that is a significant amount, particularly in a race where you've got 13 other horses. So 3 points isn't a lot. And what I've done here is I've illustrated this in points, because that's how a lot of people think. It's gone in and out this amount of points. Okay, so it went in 1.5 points. It went in half point. It went in, 1.5. Yeah. Lose my train of thought. Yes, so 6-4 is basically 1.5 to 1. So it went in by 2. Oh yeah, it went in by 2 points. Not even 3 points. 2 points. It went from 3.5 to 1 to 1.5 to 1, basically speaking. Now, another way of doing this, health warning, we're going to get into some maths, but I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to try and illustrate the point, right? Because I know not everyone's going to. Some of this will go over your head. Percentages, right? So if you took all of this as 100% of the betting market, right? So if they all had an equal chance, 7-2 is the equivalent of 22.2%, 22%, right? So 22%. So there's a 22% chance at 7-2, according to the betting market, of that horse winning. There is a 78% chance anything else could win, right? Trust me, the percentages are right? Okay, so some people in life have head for these numbers and some people don't. You can do these things on a calculator. There are things, I'll explain that in a minute, but there are calculators you can use if you want to work it out anyway. 2-1. By the time we got to 2-1, You're then talking about 33.3%. So we've gone from 22.2% chance of winning to 33.3% chance of winning. That means the chances of anything else winning has now gone to 66.6 recurring percent. Here, with 78%, now it's 66% chance. That ultimately means that these prices have to get bigger because this has got shorter. It has only got shorter by 1.5 points, but 13 other horses have lost in total 12% of the betting market, 78 to 66, right? By the time you get to 6 to 4, 6 to 4 is the equivalent in a 100% betting market. That's the equivalent of a 40% chance of winning. So it went from 22%, 33% to 40% chance, which means the rest of the market only has 60% chance of winning. So because one horse shortened up only by 2 points, but it was at the top end of the market, what it meant was a lot of other horses had to get bigger to accommodate the percentages. Now, here, why does that mean you get bigger numbers down here? It means that because at the top end of the market, a 2 point movement there is 22% to 40% chance of winning. It doesn't work the same down here because you're talking about such tiny fractions. I'm not going to go into all the whatever, but by the time you get to the bottom here, you're talking about 0.0% chance of winning in a race like that. So actually, you have to move a lot of points to move the percentage. So generally speaking, you see this happen in lots and lots of races every single day. One horse comes in for support and the bookmakers shorten the odds by, this case, 2 points. But the impact of that further down the line is really, really significant. So you've got horses down here, let's have a look, Under the Twilight, 14s, 22, 28, doubled in price between Midnight and SP. So doubled in price. That Red Maids that we were on, 40s, 50s, doubled in price. Accidental Agent, 16s, 28, 50s, tripled in price. Power Over Me, 40s to 150s, tripled in price. So what you see, stretch my fingers, hang on, let's have a bit of a Vimto. So what you see is lots and lots of horses getting bigger. And what I've talked about this loads on the channel, but people have it in their heads, it's a drifter, it's bad. These horses aren't all bad. You might have a horse that somebody's literally going, my horse has got no chances, it's inside of knowledge, and it might be drifting like a barge. That does happen on rare occasions. But what you've got here is at the bottom end of the market, by the time you've got even between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, you've got here 10 horses that drifted in price. Some albeit small, 130 to 4 to 1. But when you start getting in the choppy end of the market here, it looks much more significant, particularly when you compare it from midnight the night before. You've got horses double, tripling in odds. It doesn't mean all of these horses were no hopers. It means that something else had got shorter. And because it was at the top of the market, it impacts the bottom of the market in a much more substantial way in terms of points. I'm hoping that enough of you have got the point there, because I think this is a really good illustrative example of what happens. So that's kind of point one, is horses drift all the time, and lots of them do, and arguably more of them do than shorten up. Now, as a side point, what horse won the race? Newsreader. What happened? 7 to 1, 5 to 1, 5 to 1. Didn't have much going on in the market. That's the horse that won. What was second? Completed. 40s, 66 to 1. Got bigger by 26 points. Accidental Agent was third. Was second? Well, they were second and third. I think it was third. 16s, 28s, 50s. It was one of the biggest drifters second biggest in terms of point value in the whole race. It doesn't mean nobody liked it. It meant something had to give somewhere down the line. And what generally happens with bookmakers is they will look at where the liability is, so where they can push it. But also, they'll have to take a view of looking at a certain horse. It's an ageing horse. It was going to run its last race. So, do you know what? If it's run, we know that. There's going to be bias against stuff like that. So, there's always bias at this point in the market against older horses. So, they get much bigger. Okay. All right, if you're still with me, well done. Let's go to the next point I wanted to make. So, if you look at midnight, right, and now I'm going to start talking about overround figures. I'm going to put this down for a second while I talk about that, but overround figures. What do I mean by overround figures? I mean, it's a way of working out what is the percentage profit margin the bookmakers are aiming to take in the long term, right? So we can look at this race in isolation. I can talk to you about the figures here, about what potentially that is. But this happens all the time and every day in every race, right? So there is a margin that bookmakers take. So when I was talking about 100% of the market, if this was truly, if you converted all of this into fractions and worked in a percentage terms, right? Because this isn't about a 14 runner race and this isn't about this horse particularly, but when I'm talking about 22%, 22.2, 33.3, 40%, they're fixed amounts, they're fixed percentages, right? So that's what those odds mean in percentage chances of winning. And I always just don't even bother going there on the channel in terms of the true maths on it, because you could be great at reading form and you could be great at understanding betting market, but in order to really optimise your potential for return, you need to understand maths, and not everybody does. But you don't have to if you use certain calculators. When I'm talking about overrounds, like I've talked about before, there are things out there called bet calculators. I use a bet calculator all the time. Somebody said to me the other day, I can't remember if I mentioned this, because I used to use one. There's a free one that you can get, and you just get the app for it. And I'm sure someone flagged it, and I went and looked, and I was like, that's actually way better than the one I've been using. And I'm sure that didn't used to be as good. So free bet calculator. But you can also find if you Google overround calculators. And what you can do is then you can calculate the overround. So what I've done here is with this race is at midnight I've put every horse in and I've calculated what is the total amount of percent. If it was a pure race and there was no advantage to bookmakers, the bookmakers weren't taking any money, all of these would add up to 100%. If you put these into an overround calculator, it says they add up to 132%. So at midnight, the night before this race, if those were the prices that never moved and never changed, long term, and if every race was priced the same, the bookmakers should, in theory, mathematically, take a 32% profit margin off punters. 32%. That is massive. 32%. So you think about how much tax or commission you pay, or whatever, the VAT you pay on things, whatever it might be. 32%. That's what they're taking at midnight on this, and this isn't general. This is the specific race, 32%. But it's not an abnormal race, I wouldn't say. 32%, because this adds up to 132%. What's happening at 4:30? At 4:30, you get to 127%. So what we're saying here is you have got a mathematically better chance from a pricing point of view at 4:30, so half an hour before the race, than you have at midnight before the race. That is true in most races. Not all, and there'll be mitigating factors like non-runners, changing markets and whatever. But broadly speaking, betting half an hour before the race compared to midnight, you're going to get, on average, slightly better odds. So the bookmakers are taking 32% here, 27% here. By the time you get to SP, you get to 123%. So they're taking 23% profit margin here. Now, what I would say is that is not abnormal in for a race like that, but that figure is definitely growing, and the Gambling Commission are supposed to monitor. There's not an exact figure that says this is what bookmakers should take or not, and that's problematic in itself. They can do what they want, but 123%. If you roll back 5 years ago, that would be a rarity that you'd find a race. In terms of what I would say, that you're taking 123% overround figure. So this might not seem a lot, 9%, but if you think about, for every £100 you make, the bookmaker's going to take 32% off. It's £100 you put on, the bookmaker's going to take 32% at this point. 27 here, 23% there. So I'm hoping some of you are still with me on this point, and what I'm saying is making sense, because I'm trying to use the simplest language I possibly can. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if you are betting and you don't know what you're doing, the best time to place your bet is in the morning when best price guaranteed kicks in, for if you're using a bookmaker with best price guaranteed, because the best price guaranteed will give you the starting price or any other bigger price it was, whatever it was, whether it was an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, best price guaranteed in the morning. That is, if you didn't know what you were doing and you're starting out and betting, the best time to do it is when best price guaranteed goes live, because you will take either the starting price, which is going to be a lower overround figure than the night before or even before the race, but you'll have some horses that will be bigger than that, so you've got the best of both worlds. And that's why best price guaranteed is such a useful thing, and why so many bookmakers are basically eroding it, and particularly in multiples, because ultimately, and again, goes to the point we've made many times on the channel, people will say multiples are terrible, they're the worst type of bet you can do. If you are betting with value, it multiplies the value. If you're betting without understanding value, you're potentially accumulating worse and worse value by a multiple. So someone who doesn't know what they're doing, multiples are bad. Somebody who understands value and price of a horse and what it should be, so perceived value, that person can benefit. That is one of the ultimate things that I am doing in my own personal betting on the channel, is finding horses that I believe the price is bigger than it should be at midnight. And that is in spite, in this case, of a situation where you've got 132% overround, because on average more horses get bigger than get shorter, and more of my horses actually get shorter. In this case, Red Maids did not, it doubled the price. That does happen, right? But on average, horse prices get bigger compared to midnight to the time of the race. Mine get shorter on average, and that's in spite of this shift in percentages. Okay, so so starting price is in theory a truer price, and the bookies are taking less of a percentage, but they protect themselves the night before, because there are shrewdies about who will try and find gaps and stuff in what they're doing. And here you can see significant moves. This horse went from 72 to 64. As it was, I think it was 6th, 7th. It wasn't really involved. Weird horse. You look at the history of the horse, it's always overbet. Always goes off much shorter than actually it should do. And you will find that in situations, there are a lot of horses that are consistently overbet for varying reasons, whether it's to do with trainer, owner, jockey. It could be the owner themselves, who just likes to bet on their own horses with significant money. You'll find horses consistently overbet, and you'll find horses consistently underbet, i.e. that the price is always bigger than it really should be relative to the horse. Okay. Any questions on any of this stuff, feel free to put it in there. And if those of you who are sat watching this, you've got tons of your own knowledge and you want to share something, or it's relative, it's a relative point to what I'm saying, feel free to shove it in the comments. But what I'm trying to do by illustrating this is saying that the worst time to bet actually is the night before, unless you have some level of insight into what the value of a horse should be, because more horses drift from midnight to the start of the race than not. That is what I'm saying to you. So hopefully that's an interesting point to some of you, and that's why bog is so important, and that's why bookmakers are basically at the moment taking away bog, taking away extra places. So these are things that they've used to be able to get bog everywhere, best price guaranteed everywhere. It used to be the night before. It used to get all the extra places. So the percentage chance of you actually making profit, or the profit margin you can make, is just eroding all the time. If you roll back 10, 15 years ago, when lots of more bookmakers offered even better extra places than what you get now, and most bookmakers were best price guaranteed, and it was the night before, and you could do it on multiples, it was so much easier to try and use a strategy, my strategy, but any strategy in terms of what you can do now. It is harder for me to try and make a profit now than it was. That doesn't mean, explain why this calendar year compared to last year or the year before, it's worse. It is getting harder every single year. 100% it's getting harder. I'm genuinely having a tough year as it goes. I mean, it's interesting actually. If I look at my channel history, 2022, I overachieved in terms of what I would usually be doing at that point. 2023 was about average. 2024, I'm underachieving. So I've had a particularly good year. I've still got whatever, like, 7 weeks of this one left, but this has been under indexing by some way. So channel's down, like, in terms of what I'm doing off the channel, I'm in a profitable position for the calendar year, but nowhere near where I was the last couple of years. That would be true to say. Okay, right. Take a breath. Right. Now, I'm going to mention exchanges. I'm going to show you one more piece of paper. We're going to one more bit of percentages. So, what's the difference between a betting exchange and a betting sportsbook? Sportsbooks are run by bookmakers and they dictate, as we've just talked about, the percentage that they can take on the odds. So, in that example of the 5 o'clock at Kempton on the 6th of November, at the starting prices, bookmakers are making a 23% profit margin on average. If that was every race everywhere, and 132, so that's a 32% night before. Okay, they dictate how much profit margin they can take. They don't have to stick to 100% pure market. Also, it's their money. So if you win, you take their money. They don't want you to take their money. So you're playing against a corporation, and they are using unfavourable terms. That's sportsbook betting. That's betting shops on the high street. The game is stacked against you, and that's why people will always say 1% long-term people actually make money. And I would say to you, it is harder and harder and harder, like I've said, to make profit using sports books at the moment, because everything's been eroded, like I talked about. What's the difference with a betting exchange? So, and this does get confusing because of Betfair, because Betfair has sportsbook and exchange, and people talk about Betfair exchange all the time. It's a company that has a sportsbook and an exchange. What's an exchange? An exchange is you're betting against somebody else who's playing. So it's like online gaming. You're competing against someone else, and you're that's what you do. It's like, if you're doing in sports, but you're trying to beat the house, if you like. If it's an exchange, you're trying to beat somebody else. So you can't do multiples on an exchange, and singles are split down between a win and a place, and you can do all sorts of other complicated stuff, which I'm not going to going into. But you're competing against someone else. What's in it for the people that run the exchanges? So Betfair have got both, but you've got all sorts of other exchanges that exist. They take a commission, so it's a few percent. So it is less percent than you would get on an Overround figure from a sports book, but they're guaranteed a very low level of consistent income all the way through, because they're taking a commission percentage off everybody. So it's a useful thing to do, but also it means that the odds on the exchange, there is not a percentage that has been taken by the house, because the house are charging you a small set commission. They're not taking the percentage off the odds. So what does that mean? So what it means is, when we look in the example of the 5 o'clock at Kempton, and we're talking about 123%, so the bookmaker taking 23%, on the exchange, it should be near enough 100. On that 5 o'clock Kempton, it was 101% when I calculated it. And this is what you add. So what I've got here is starting price, Betfair exchange price, and I've tried to write that. I know it's annoying, but I've written it in the same format because I don't want to get into easy to use it in fraction terms like we would use, rather than kind of terms that other people aren't familiar with. That's why it gets confusing in exchange for some people, because the people go like, I know what 4-1 means, but I don't know what 5.2 means. So what I've written is in the same format. So we've got starting price with 123%, so that's 23% extra to go to the bookmakers, and this is what the pure market looks like, and what some people would say is the true value. And what you will notice here is Smart Hero was identical in this example for the Betfair exchange. So actually, if you're getting that the 6-4 you were getting starting price is actually completely the same as the Betfair sportsbook. So that's 40% of the betting market is taken up. But actually, When you look at 60% chance of the others, this is what it truly looks like. And the bigger you go down, the bigger differential you see. So you've got their newsreader, the favourite, 5-1 SP. If you were using the Betfair Exchange, you would have got 5.76%. So that's the equivalent of like what's 15%. 15%. Yeah, I think it's roughly speaking 15%. 15% better price. And that's on the horse that won. Your price was 15% better. If you think about how much money you might make in a year or how much money you might lose, and if every single horse you were getting 15% better odds, it would make a significant difference. The further you go down here, the bigger the differentials. So you get to Giorgio M, 28-1 on the Betfair Exchange, 47.47. That was the starting price. So 19.47 different. Under the Twilight, 28, 49-1, 21. You get down to some of the horses, like my horse, Red Maid's 50s. On the exchange, the Betfair starting price, 109.96, basically 110-1. It was more than double the odds and quadruple the odds of what the price I was taking for the channel. But the true price on Betfair Exchange at the point of the race starting was 110-1. You then get to Accidental Agent, 50s, that was 133.52-1. That is almost treble. So bear in mind that horse started, it was 16-1 at midnight before the race. The Betfair starting price was 133.52. The horse was placed. I haven't put on here what the place odds were. They were the win odds. Extraordinary, right? So that's eight times, something like that. About eight times, more than 8 times the odds of 16-1 to get to that. Completed. That was placed 66. Betfair Exchange 140.34-1. Power over me 150 is the true price on Betfair Exchange was 473-1. This is 100% market. That's 123% market. If you like betting with singles only and win singles, this is the example we're talking about here. If you get on the Betfair Exchange, more or less in every situation, you will find that the Betfair starting price is better than the starting price. It's very occasional you get it the other way around, but in most cases, and like this is not abnormal. The bigger the odds, the bigger differential becomes in terms of points. And if you bet in types of stuff like I do, and you're betting big priced horses, the difference that you can get in a return on Betfair starting price for a win compared to starting price is really, really massive. Hopefully that's making sense. It's interesting. So some of you will watch lots of other channels. There's a really good channel, fairly new out there, Pegasus Race Ratings. Chap called Dave. He has got very clear statistics. It's all through a Patreon, but it's free. But at some point he said he might start charging and doing a service, which is perfectly fine because he's diligently showing what he's doing. What he's showing is he's showing a long-term profit since he's existed. With his stats, though, what's really interesting is because he's the only one that I've seen that's doing it on YouTube, he's recording his stats to Betfair starting price, not SP starting price, Betfair starting price. So not industry starting price, Betfair starting price. And what that does is it will significantly inflate his ability to show profit. He's not fudging any figures, just to be really clear, because I think what he's doing is very decent. But his figures, compared to if he were just taking SP, are going to be wildly different. So particularly if and when, and I think there was one earlier in the year where he hit one, I think it was Royal Dress, where he got a much better price on Betfair Exchange than he did on starting price. And it's interesting because it's a really good illustrative point about actually, and I'm not saying if he's not keeping track about whether or not he would, well, he does know if he was checking the starting price. But what his point is, the best way to back the horses is to use Betfair starting price, and actually that's the Betfair starting price. You could have a bigger price on Betfair at different points, but if all you did was just at the Betfair starting price, he's showing you how much profit you would make that way. If I did that on what I did and I only did win singles, you'd see a whole world of different figures on there. But that's not my game. My game is place markets and multiples and stringing things together, and it's the Sportsbook. But for those of you that like betting win singles, and you like, if you want to follow some of my stuff on bigger price stuff, you're going to get a significantly better point price point on there. But yeah, if you haven't already checked out Dave on Pegasus Race Ratings, it's worth a look. He doesn't do videos every day, but it's everything he does is very stats orientated, well researched, and long term he has shown a profit on there. And yeah, it's different to what I'm doing, but he's one of the few that I would suggest that is absolutely worth looking at. As I said, he's talking about some point charging in the future, which is I've got no issue with people charging if they're doing it in a really legit way. I have issue, as most of you will know, with people charging when they're absolutely mugging somebody off. So, i.e., giving you some sort of false information about, you know, taking a cut of when their best period of time was to when it wasn't. Or, you know, I saw some stuff the other day on some other people's comment sections, and there was some chatter going on, and it just looked ridiculous because the person was being challenged, and what they were basically sort of seeming to allude to is they didn't even know what their monthly profit and loss was, but yet they're charging money. Ridiculous. So if you believe the comment that was on whatever I was reading, then yeah, clearly they were losing. But yeah. Anyway, so I think we're there, right? So what we're saying is bet for our starting price trumps starting price. So if you like win singles only, that is where you should be. You should be on an exchange, right? But I don't really talk about that on here, and I'm not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to put stuff on here that converts directly to an exchange, because where my niche on this channel is about multiples. That isn't to say that I don't go on the exchange. And actually, if you're looking at Red Maze as an example, it lost. But if it's 25 the night before and it's 110 to 1 on the Betfair Exchange starting price, where would it make most sense to put the money? Yes, it lost, right? So, but actually, how many of those times do they come in? So Betfair Exchange beats starting price. Exchanges are better for win singles. Okay, the starting price, the percentage the bookmakers take, is crap, but better the starting price than it is the night before. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're not confident with what you're doing, then avoid betting the night before. Or if you are, you're arguably better taking starting price, and that's why I'd always say. Not with my select, and this is key, not with my selections, but if you own stuff, take starting price. And particularly someone like Sky Bet, the overround figure is even greater with Sky Bet, because Sky Bet are offering you extra places, but they can't diddle you about the starting price. So particularly if you're betting with Sky Bet, take, and it's your own selections, or you know, whatever, then take the starting price. My selections, I'm happy with the odds I'm putting out, with the equations that I've made. I'm happy with it. Even if some of them do drift, I might take that into account, but my stuff is better that way. If it's your own stuff, leave it as starting price. You will get, overall in long term, you'll get a better result. But if all you want to do is bet win singles, go and have a look at the exchange and see if you can familiarise yourself with that. I'm not going to bring up exchange markets every day on here. It was more about to show you the ridiculous difference between the two, because for me the difference is getting bigger. The difference between the overround figure in a sports book compared to the Betfair Exchange, near enough 100%, in that example 101%, that gap is getting bigger, and the gambling commission should be paying much more attention, in my view, and stepping in and saying, do you know what, bookmakers, I think you're you may be taking a little bit too much of a cut there, because all we see at the moment is bookmakers looking after profit. They cancel your account for sneezing. They have less extra places. They are eroding best price guaranteed all the time. And all it's doing is it's actually turning people away from having a bet. There are less people going to be having a bet on things like horse racing because of what bookmakers are doing. And people will turn more to things like the lottery, and you'll see an increase in things like that. Or you'll push people to like FOBDs or whatever like that, which is a terrible, terrible thing, because nobody wins long term. The house wins, right? So it's not like you've got an edge in the market where you can go, well, I know that overround's 123%, but I know how to win. You can't win long term on a FOBD. It doesn't work like that. Like fruit machines, you can't win long term. Everyone, you know, back in the day when fruit machines were rife in pubs, everyone's had a day where they were in the pub and they won 20 quid in the fruit machine and thought this is brilliant. But long term, you can never meet someone who wins unless they've got some sort of algorithm trick that they know. You can't win long term. There's a cut in those machines. So yeah, I think the Gambling Commission should be doing more, and they should be paying a lot more attention to the percentage of the overround figure that the bookmakers take in, because I think they're diddling people more and more and more. And I know on here I've talked a few times seasonally where we get to the Grand National. You don't even want to know what the overround figures are in a race like the Grand National. That's why I don't really get involved on the channel in the Grand National, and that's why I say it's statistically one of the worst races to bet in the whole year. All right, you've had nearly an hour. I think that's it. There's probably other stuff I was going to say. It's fallen out of my head. I'm hoping you've learned some stuff for some of you. I'm hoping it was useful. If you've got questions, put it in there. As I said, though, I'm not trying to teach people a tutorial about loads of stuff with betting. I'm trying to illustrate a few points to help a few people along the way. All right. Thank you very much. If you got to the end, well done to you. And hopefully your tea's finished and your biscuits have been eaten. Thank you. Bye-bye.